"Stop it, Victoria. She's your fiancée's mother." Marina's trembling voice echoed through the mansion as Daniel froze at the doorway, watching the woman he planned to marry raise her hand against his frail mother, Carmen. In that instant, his world of wealth and illusion began to crumble. He thought he knew love. He thought he knew loyalty. But what he's about to uncover will change everything, exposing who truly cared and who only pretended to. Before we continue, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment where you're watching from. We love to know that. Daniel Hayes, one of the city's youngest billionaires, sat alone in his study, glass of scotch in hand, staring at nothing. Around him, success gleamed from every corner. Mahogany shelves stacked with awards, minimalist art worth more than most houses, and the scent of power stitched into the air itself. Yet behind all of it, there was silence. The kind that came when you realized you could buy everything, except peace. Upstairs, another world existed. Mrs. Carmen Hayes, Daniel's mother, once known for her sharp mind and sharper grace, now lived in a haze of soft confusion. Alzheimer's had taken pieces of her, her sense of time, her certainty, her control, but not her gentleness. She spent her days humming faint lullabies she couldn't remember the words to, tracing invisible patterns on the arms of her chair. Beside her, always, was Marina. Marina Alvarez wasn't a nurse. She wasn't trained, polished, or eloquent, but she had what medicine couldn't teach: patience. She knew when to speak and when silence comforted better. She knew that Carmen forgot faces, but never forgot tone. She knew that when the older woman's eyes filled with panic, all she needed to hear was one simple truth. "I'm here," Marina would whisper, her hand steady over Carmen's. "You're not alone." And for a few moments each day, the fog lifted. Downstairs, in a world far colder, Victoria Langston scrolled through her phone, her diamond ring flashing in the sunlight. Daniel's fiancée. Perfect posture, perfect smile, perfect everything, except heart. When Daniel was home, Victoria was charm incarnate. She spoke softly, offered tea to his mother, and placed gentle hands on Carmen's shoulders like a saint in satin. But the moment Daniel's car disappeared down the driveway, her voice hardened, her patience evaporated, and her disdain surfaced like a knife's edge. "She doesn't even know who I am," Victoria muttered once, watching Carmen struggle to remember the day. "What's the point of pretending?" Marina looked up from her work, her tone polite but firm. "The point is kindness, ma'am." Victoria's smirk was sharp. "You talk like you're part of this family. You're not. You're staff." Marina said nothing. She simply went back to folding a blanket, her silence louder than any argument. That was the first crack, quiet but real. Days blended into one another. Daniel buried himself in meetings and expansions, rarely noticing the undercurrent at home. He loved his mother deeply, but guilt made him absent. It was easier to send flowers than to face what she was becoming. One evening, as the sunset spilled amber across the marble floors, Carmen grew restless. She kept calling out a name: "Leo. Leo, don't go!" Eyes wild with fear. Marina knelt beside her, gently holding her hands. "It's okay, Mrs. Hayes. Leo's safe." "You're safe." Victoria, lounging on the couch, rolled her eyes. "You're wasting your breath." "She doesn't understand." Marina didn't respond. She just hummed a soft tune until Carmen's trembling slowed. Later that night, when Daniel came home, Victoria met him with a sweet smile. "Your mother had another episode today. Poor thing. She's slipping faster than before." "She's still comfortable, right?" Daniel asked absently, loosening his tie. "Of course. Marina takes care of her." Victoria's tone was smooth, but the irritation beneath it was unmistakable. The next morning, Marina arrived early with fresh flowers. Carmen loved daisies, though she couldn't remember why. She was arranging them when Victoria's voice cut through the silence. "You know," Victoria said from the doorway, "it's funny how attached you are to her." Marina turned. She reminds me of my grandmother. Your grandmother wasn't a billionaire's mother, Victoria snapped. Try to remember your place. Marina's eyes met hers, calm but unflinching. My place is wherever I'm needed. Victoria's jaw tightened. Don't get clever. Carmen's soft laughter drifted from the hallway. She was humming again, touching the petals of the daisies with childlike wonder. Marina smiled at her gently. Beautiful, aren't they? She said. Yes, Carmen whispered. Just like you, dear. Victoria watched, something bitter curling inside her chest. That afternoon Daniel returned early from work. Something rare. He found Marina in the kitchen preparing tea, and his mother sitting quietly in the corner, humming under her breath. She's calmer lately, Daniel said. Marina nodded. Routine helps her feel safe. He smiled faintly. Thank you, Marina, for staying patient with her. She's easy to care for, Marina replied softly. She just needs love. We all do. Her words lingered, heavier than they sounded. That night, Victoria found Daniel in the study. You know, she began, sitting beside him. I don't think your mother's condition is improving. Maybe it's time to move her to a care facility. Somewhere professional. Daniel frowned. She's fine here. Daniel, be realistic. You have a company to run. I have a life to manage. We can't let her illness take over everything. He looked at her sharply. She's my mother. Victoria's tone softened. Practiced empathy. Of course, darling. I just mean, for everyone's good. Daniel said nothing. But something in him shifted. A small, quiet awareness that he couldn't name yet. Later, when he kissed his mother goodnight, Carmen mistook him for her late husband, Arthur. She murmured, tears glistening. You came back. Daniel froze, heart breaking and healing all at once. He held her trembling hand. I'm here, Mom. I'm not leaving. Marina stood by the door, watching, silent, unseen, but knowing exactly what that moment meant. Down the hall, Victoria poured herself a glass of wine, her reflection flickering in the dark window. One day, she muttered under her breath, you'll all see who really belongs here. And in that quiet, between guilt and greed, between loyalty and pride, the house held its breath, waiting for truth to reveal itself. The days that followed unfolded like polished glass, beautiful to the eye, sharp to the touch. The Hayes mansion gleamed under the morning sun, its corridors spotless, its silence deceptive. To an outsider, it was a picture of wealth and order, but within its walls, two women lived on opposite ends of grace, one born into privilege and the other into purpose. Victoria Langston wore her privilege like armor. Every morning she descended the staircase with the poise of a queen, her perfume announcing her before her voice ever did. Marina, on the other hand, moved quietly, like a shadow of compassion threading through the cold marble halls. Their worlds collided again one late afternoon in the drawing room. Carmen was painting. Her strokes were wild, unfocused, the colors bleeding into one another without pattern or form. Marina stood behind her, steadying the canvas, encouraging softly, That's beautiful, Mrs. Hayes. Keep going. Carmen smiled faintly. I'm painting... Daniel? Marina nodded, warmth flickering in her voice. He'll love it. Across the room, Victoria looked up from her laptop and snorted. That's not Daniel, that's a blur. You're wasting paint again. Marina froze. Carmen's hands stopped mid-air, the brush trembling. Did I do something wrong? Marina turned to Victoria, voice low but firm. Please don't talk to her like that. Victoria's lips curved in mock sweetness. Oh, and you'll teach me how to speak now? I'm just asking for kindness. Victoria set her laptop aside, rising slowly. You think you can stand there and correct me, Marina? You forget you work for me. Not her. Carmen's fragile voice trembled. She's helping me. Victoria's tone sharpened. She's helping herself to attention she doesn't deserve. For the first time, Marina's eyes lifted, calm but burning. I don't care about attention, Miss Langston. I care about respect." The silence that followed was razor-thin. Then Carmen whispered softly, "You're kind, dear. My son should listen to you more." Victoria's eyes flicked toward the old woman, and in that single look, hatred bloomed like poison. That evening, Daniel returned from his board meeting, unaware of the storm brewing inside his home. Victoria greeted him at the door, all smiles again, wrapping her arm around his. "How was the meeting, darling?" "Long," he sighed. "How's Mother?" "She's fine," Victoria said smoothly. "A bit confused today, but Marina handled it. She's been rather overstepping lately." Daniel frowned. "Overstepping? She thinks she runs this house. It's sweet, really, until it's not." He shrugged it off. "You're reading too much into it. She's just doing her job." "Exactly," Victoria said, her voice sugar-coated, "and she should remember what that is." The next morning, Daniel caught a glimpse of something that unsettled him. He was leaving for the office when he heard his mother's laughter echo from the garden. He paused. Through the glass doors he saw Marina sitting beside Carmen on a bench, feeding her tiny spoonfuls of oatmeal while telling a story. Carmen was smiling, truly smiling, her eyes alive in a way he hadn't seen in months. For a moment, Daniel just watched. Something softened inside him. Then he saw Victoria standing on the balcony above, arms folded, eyes cold as frost. Later that night, the tension broke again. It began with a simple accident. Carmen, wandering the hallway in confusion, had spilled tea on an antique rug. Marina rushed to her side immediately. "It's okay, Mrs. Hayes, no harm done," she whispered, dabbing gently at the floor. Victoria appeared seconds later, her voice slicing the air. "For God's sake, can't you keep her under control?" Marina straightened. "She's not a child to control. She's losing her mind," Victoria snapped. "And you're too sentimental to see it." Carmen flinched at the tone. "Don't yell," she murmured, her eyes wide. Marina's voice trembled now, but not from fear. "She understands more than you think." "Oh, please," Victoria scoffed. "You think you're the saint of this household because you hold her hand? Because you play nurse?" Marina's patience finally cracked. "No, because I care." For a heartbeat, silence ruled. Then Victoria's hand twitched. Not quite a slap, not yet. But Daniel's voice broke through before it could land. "What's going on here?" He stood at the hallway's end, his face unreadable. Victoria stepped back immediately, switching tones. "Darling, your mother had an episode." Marina got defensive. Marina turned, her eyes meeting Daniel's. "That's not what happened." "Enough," he said quietly. "Both of you. I'll handle this later." And with that, he guided his mother gently away, unaware of the small tear rolling down Marina's cheek as she whispered, "I was only trying to protect her." That night, Marina sat alone in the servants' quarters, writing in her old notebook. The paper smelled faintly of lavender and memory. "Kindness shouldn't feel like rebellion," she wrote. "But here it does." Meanwhile, upstairs, Victoria poured herself another drink and smiled into her glass. "She won't last here much longer," she murmured. But what she didn't know, what she couldn't control, was that the very walls were starting to turn against her. The butler had seen. The housekeeper had heard. And Daniel, for the first time in years, had started to notice what silence tried to tell him. The next morning, Marina entered the living room with fresh flowers again. Carmen's eyes brightened at the sight. "For me?" she whispered. "Always," Marina smiled. From the doorway, Daniel watched the exchange quietly. The air was soft, almost sacred. He saw the peace his mother carried around Marina, and the way she flinched around Victoria. Something was forming in his mind. Doubt. Real, unsettling doubt. As Marina turned to leave, Daniel stopped her gently. "Marina," he said, "has Victoria ever said anything unkind to my mother?" Marina froze, torn between honesty and fear. "Mr. Hayes, it's not my place." "I'm making it your place," he said. Her eyes met his, honest and heavy. "Then yes, sir," more than once. Daniel's silence said everything, and for the first time, the house didn't feel like his anymore. It felt like a stage where everyone had been playing roles he'd been too blind to see. The evening of the charity dinner arrived dressed in elegance. The Hayes mansion glowed under chandeliers and candlelight. Violins whispered across the hall, glasses clinked, and laughter moved like perfume through the air. To the guests, everything looked perfect. The billionaire heir, his flawless fiancée, his ailing mother seated gracefully near the grand piano. But beneath the glitter, a storm was waiting to be born. Marina stood at the edge of the room, blending into the background like the invisible thread that held everything together. She wore a simple uniform, hair tied neatly, eyes constantly flicking toward Mrs. Carmen. She wasn't supposed to be there. Not really. The event was formal, exclusive, but Daniel had insisted. "Mother feels calm when you're nearby," he'd said. Carmen, dressed in pale lavender silk, looked radiant yet distant. Every few minutes she'd lean toward Marina, whispering, "Do I know these people?" Marina would smile gently. "Yes, ma'am. They're your guests." Carmen would nod, pretending she remembered. Across the room, Victoria floated from guest to guest, laughter practiced and bright. She wore a shimmering silver gown that caught every eye, especially Daniel's. To the crowd, she looked perfect. But her smiles never reached her eyes. They hid something sharper. When the speeches began, Daniel stood to thank the guests. His words were smooth, his voice controlled. Marina listened from the shadows, quietly proud of how gentle he sounded when he spoke of his mother. Then it happened, the moment that would change everything. As the applause faded, Carmen suddenly rose from her chair. "Arthur?" she called softly, eyes locking on an elderly man in the front row. "Arthur, you came back." The room fell silent. The man, a guest startled, blinked. "I'm sorry?" Carmen's hands trembled. "You promised you wouldn't leave again. You kept your word." A murmur ran through the guests. Marina stepped forward, instinct guiding her. "Mrs. Hayes, it's okay," she whispered gently. "He's not—" But Victoria's voice cut in first, clear, cruel, and ringing through the silence like glass breaking. "She's confusing a guest with her dead husband. My God, how embarrassing." A few polite laughs rippled through the crowd. Nervous, uncertain. Marina froze. Then she turned, her voice shaking but strong. "She's remembering someone she loved," she said. "That's not embarrassing." The words fell heavy into the silence, silencing even the music. Daniel turned sharply toward Marina. Victoria's smile faltered. Carmen blinked, confused. "Did I do something wrong?" Marina took her hand gently. "No, Mom." "You just remembered love," Victoria hissed under her breath. "Enough, Marina." "No," Marina said quietly, still holding Carmen's hand. "Not this time." Every eye in the room was on them. The maid, the mother, the billionaire, and the perfect fiancé. Daniel's voice finally broke through. "That's enough, everyone. Please, continue with dinner," but no one moved. The illusion of perfection had cracked. Later, when the guests were gone and the music had died, the house felt heavier than ever. Daniel sat in his study, silent, while Victoria paced like a caged thing. "You should fire her," she snapped. "She humiliated us in front of everyone." "She defended my mother," Daniel said quietly. "She challenged me," Victoria countered. "In public. You let a maid undermine your fiancé." Daniel's gaze hardened. "What would you have done? Laughed along? She made a fool of us." "She stopped you from doing it yourself." For a second, Victoria's breath caught. "You're taking her side?" "I'm taking my mother's side," he said, her face flushed. "You're blinded by pity. That woman's manipulating you, and your mother. Don't you see it?" Daniel stood abruptly, his voice low but cutting. "You think everyone with less than you wants something from you. Maybe that's your problem. Victoria stared at him, not in shock, but in warning. "Be careful, Daniel. You don't know how far I'll go if you embarrass me." He turned away. "That's what I'm afraid of." In her small quarters, Marina sat beside a single candle, writing in her notebook again. "Truth is quiet," she wrote, "but when spoken aloud it sounds like rebellion." She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, only that tonight, for the first time, she had spoken what her heart refused to swallow. The next morning was eerily calm. Daniel left early for a short business trip, a deal he couldn't postpone. Before leaving, he stopped by his mother's room. "Marina," he said softly. "Thank you for last night." She looked startled. "Sir, I didn't mean to cause trouble." "You did the right thing," he said, "even when no one else would." When he left, Marina stood frozen for a moment, unsure if what she'd heard was real. Downstairs, Victoria watched him drive away, her hand tightening around a cup of untouched coffee. Once he was gone, she moved quickly, footsteps sharp across the marble floor. She entered Carmen's room without knocking. The older woman looked up weakly. "Victoria?" "Don't talk," Victoria said, her tone clipped. "Just listen." She moved closer, voice low and venomous. "You've embarrassed me for the last time. You and that maid both." Carmen's eyes filled with fear. "Please don't." Marina appeared at the doorway, tray in hand, frozen mid-step. "What are you doing?" Victoria turned, eyes wild. "You again. Always listening, always watching." "She's scared," Marina said firmly. "Step back, or what?" Victoria sneered. "You'll tell Daniel." "He's not here, sweetheart. It's just you and me." Marina set the tray down slowly, her voice trembling but unwavering. "Then I'll say it clearly. Stop it." Victoria's laugh was sharp. "You're a maid." "You don't give orders," Carmen whimpered softly. "Marina, please." Victoria's temper snapped. "You think you matter here? You're nothing." And then, in one motion, her hand struck, not at Marina, but toward Carmen, knocking a cup of tea from the bedside table. The hot liquid splashed across the blanket, startling the old woman into tears. Marina moved instantly, pulling Carmen back and shouting, "Enough!" The sound of the shattered cup echoed through the hall, and with it, the last of Marina's restraint. Unbeknownst to them, the housekeeper at the corridor's end had seen everything, and upstairs, the security cameras, rarely checked, mostly forgotten, captured it all. That night, Victoria sat in the living room, glass of wine in hand, pretending calm. Marina stayed beside Carmen until she fell asleep. Outside, thunder rolled. The storm that had been building for weeks had finally found its edge, and somewhere between guilt and rage, silence and truth, a reckoning waited, patient, inevitable, and already in motion. 2 days later, the rain returned, soft at first, then relentless. The mansion felt different now. The laughter, the polished smiles, the gentle music, all gone. In their place hung an air of unease, a silence that clung to the walls. Marina moved through the halls like a ghost, carrying tea, folding linen, checking on Carmen, pretending not to notice how Victoria's eyes followed her every step. The older woman had grown quieter too, retreating further into the fragile shelter of her memory. That morning, as thunder grumbled across the distant sky, Marina found Carmen staring out the window, her reflection faintly visible against the glass. "He's coming home today," she said softly, though she wasn't sure Carmen understood. Carmen smiled faintly. Arthur always came home before storms. Marina's heart ached. "Not Arthur, Mrs. Hayes. Daniel." But the old woman just patted her hand. "He's a good man. He just forgets to look." Daniel arrived home just after dusk, rainwater still clinging to his coat. The mansion greeted him the way it always did, elegant, grand, and empty. But tonight the air felt wrong. He found Victoria in the living room, glass of wine in hand, a faint smile playing at her lips. "You're early," she said. "I finished sooner than expected," he replied, scanning the room. Where's Mother? She's resting. Marina's with her. He nodded and started for the stairs, but her voice stopped him. You should know, she's been acting strange lately. Who? Both of them, Victoria said smoothly. Your mother and the maid. I think Marina's been filling her head with things. Lies. Daniel turned slowly. Lies? She told your mother I yelled at her. Can you imagine me? He said nothing, only studied her face. Perfect, composed, rehearsed. I just thought you should hear it from me first, she added, setting her glass down delicately. So you don't get confused. Right, he murmured. Confused. He climbed the stairs without another word. The hallway outside his mother's room was dim, lit only by the flicker of the storm outside. As he approached, he heard soft voices, one trembling, one calm, Carmen's voice. She said, I'm a burden. Maybe she's right. Marina's voice. No one who loves is a burden, Mrs. Hayes. A pause. Then the creak of the door as Daniel stepped inside. Carmen looked up, startled, then smiled faintly. Arthur? No, Mom, he said gently. It's me. Marina rose immediately, smoothing her uniform. Mr. Hayes. Daniel's gaze moved between them. His mother's eyes were red, her hands trembling. What happened? Marina hesitated. It's nothing, sir. Just a rough evening, Carmen murmured. She was angry again. Daniel frowned. Who was? Before Marina could answer, another voice entered the room. Daniel. Victoria stood at the door, her shadow stretching across the floor. There you are. Her tone was soft, but the look in her eyes was sharp. Daniel turned to her. Mother says you were angry with her. Victoria laughed lightly. Oh, please. You're really going to believe... But before she could finish, a sound cut her off. The faint click of a monitor from the corner of the room. Daniel turned. The small security feed glowed faintly, a reflection of the last few days. Recorded automatically by the hallway camera. He stepped closer. Daniel, Victoria said quickly. That's not... But he was already watching. The footage played silently, Victoria's hand striking the table beside Carmen, tea spilling, Marina rushing forward, her voice clear even through the faint hum of static. Enough! The room was frozen except for the flickering screen. Victoria's face drained of color. That's not what it looks like. It's exactly what it looks like, Daniel said, his voice low, trembling with restrained fury. You humiliated my mother. You frightened her. She was confused. Victoria's voice cracked. You don't understand what it's like. I understand perfectly, he snapped. You've been pretending to care while you treated her like she was in your way. She took a step forward. You're going to throw all this away for a maid? Marina flinched at the word, but Daniel didn't. For decency, he said quietly. For the truth, Victoria's composure shattered. You'll regret this, Daniel. You think this maid cares about you? She's using your pity. Daniel's eyes were cold now. Get out, her voice faltered. What? You heard me. Pack your things. You don't live here anymore. For a long moment, she stood frozen, disbelief twisting into fury. Then she laughed, low, bitter, dangerous. You think you're saving your mother, but you're just destroying yourself. And with that she turned on her heel and stormed from the room, the sound of her heels echoing like the final note of a requiem. When she was gone, silence fell again. Only the storm outside filled the void. Daniel stood still, staring at the flickering feed one last time before turning it off. His hands were shaking. I should have seen it sooner, he whispered. Marina spoke softly. You couldn't have known, sir. He turned to her, really looked at her this time. She told me you were overstepping, that you were trying to control things. Marina smiled faintly, weary. Sometimes kindness looks like defiance. Carmen reached for her hand, her voice small. You're good, dear. Don't let them change that. Daniel knelt beside his mother, taking her other hand. I promise, Mom. No one will ever hurt you again. She smiled, faint but peaceful. Arthur used to say that too, and for a moment, It didn't matter that she had the wrong name. The love behind it was still the same. That night, after Carmen had fallen asleep, Daniel found Marina in the kitchen cleaning the tea stain from an old cup. "You don't have to do that," he said. "I like fixing small messes," she replied quietly. "They remind me that not everything is beyond repair." He leaned against the counter. "I owe you more than an apology." She looked up, eyes gentle. "You don't owe me anything, Mr. Hayes. You did what you had to." "No," he said. "You did what you didn't have to. You stayed. You cared when no one else did." Marina smiled softly. Someone had to. The storm outside began to fade. The mansion, for the first time in months, felt still, not empty, but cleansing. Daniel looked toward the window where raindrops slid down the glass like closing tears. "You're not staff anymore, Marina," he said quietly. "You're family." For a long moment she didn't answer. Then she whispered, "Thank you." And when the lightning finally ceased, so did the pretending. The truth had spoken, and nothing false could stay. Morning came quiet, rinsed clean by the storm. The air outside smelled of rain and new beginnings, and for the first time in a long time, sunlight reached every corner of the Hayes mansion. Carmen awoke in her bed, calm and rested. Her hands, once restless, were still now, folded neatly on the blanket. At her bedside sat Marina, half asleep in a chair, chin resting on her palm. When Carmen stirred, Marina straightened instantly. "Good morning, Mrs. Hayes." Carmen smiled faintly. "You stayed all night?" Marina nodded. "I didn't want you to wake up alone." The older woman reached for her hand. "You remind me of someone," she murmured. "Not a nurse. Someone I used to love." Marina smiled. "Then I'm honored, ma'am." Downstairs, Daniel stood by the window of his study, the morning light falling across his face. He had barely slept, though not from anger, from clarity. The truth, once uncovered, didn't let you rest until it was lived fully. The butler entered quietly. "Miss Langston left early this morning, sir. The driver took her to the airport." Daniel nodded. "Good. Shall we remove her things?" "Yes, all of them." When the butler left, Daniel sank into his chair, his gaze drifting over the empire he had built. Contracts, awards, headlines. All symbols of victory, and none of meaning. For years he had measured his life in numbers. But the last few days had shown him something no deal ever had. The price of peace. The cost of indifference. He stood, straightened his coat, and went upstairs. In Carmen's room, the morning light spilled like gold across the walls. She was awake, humming softly as Marina brushed her hair. Daniel paused at the door. For a moment he didn't speak. He just watched. The way Marina's movements were gentle but sure, the way Carmen's face glowed with comfort. "May I come in?" he asked quietly. Marina turned, surprised. "Of course, sir." He approached, smiling faintly. "You look better, Mom." Carmen's eyes lit up. "Arthur?" He knelt beside her bed, smiling through the ache. "No, Mom, it's Daniel." She blinked, then laughed softly. "I always mix you two up." "It's okay," he said. "You're allowed to." For a moment the three of them just stayed there. No words, no pretenses, just warmth. Then Daniel looked up at Marina. "Can we talk?" She nodded, following him to the hallway. They stopped near the staircase, where the morning light fell through tall windows. Daniel looked at her for a long moment, trying to find the right words. "I've spent my whole life chasing things that didn't matter," he said finally. "Money, status, control, and I thought that made me responsible. But watching you these past weeks, watching how you care for her, it made me realize how much I've been missing." Marina shook her head gently. "You've been trying your best." "No," he said quietly. "You've been doing that." "I've just been pretending," she tried to smile. "Everyone pretends sometimes, even good people." He looked down, then back at her. "I meant what I said last night. You're not staff anymore. You're part of this family." Marina's breath caught. "Sir, Please," he interrupted. "Don't call me sir anymore." She hesitated. "Then what should I call you?" "Daniel," he said simply. They stood there for a moment in silence. Then she smiled, small, real. "Okay, Daniel." Weeks passed, and the mansion slowly transformed. The air felt lighter. The staff, once stiff and cautious, now moved with quiet ease. Carmen's laughter, fragmented but alive, echoed through the halls again. Daniel began spending his mornings with her, reading aloud from her old journals. Sometimes she remembered the words. Sometimes she didn't. But she always smiled when Marina entered the room. "My daughter," Carmen would say warmly, holding her hand. Marina never corrected her anymore. She just smiled back and whispered, "Yes, I'm here." Outside, the garden bloomed again, neglected for years, now alive with daisies and sunlight. Marina tended it every morning, and Daniel often joined her, sleeves rolled up. Dirt under his nails, one afternoon, as they watered the roses together, Daniel said quietly, "You know, I used to think wealth meant never needing anyone." Marina looked up. "And now?" He smiled faintly. "Now I think wealth is the people who stay when everything else leaves." She laughed softly. "That sounds like something your mother would say." He nodded. She probably did. Months later, on Carmen's birthday, Daniel threw a small gathering. Not the extravagant galas Victoria used to plan, but something simple, filled with warmth. Just family, close friends, and the people who had stayed through the storm. Carmen sat at the center of it all, wearing a lilac shawl and a daisy pinned to her dress. She didn't recognize everyone, but it didn't matter. She was smiling, alive in the moment. When Daniel handed her the cake, she giggled like a child. "Make a wish," Marina whispered. Carmen closed her eyes, then blew out the candles with trembling grace. "What did you wish for?" Daniel asked. Carmen smiled. "That you'd both stay happy." Marina and Daniel exchanged a quiet glance, something unspoken, something whole. That night, after everyone had gone, Daniel found himself in the garden again. The house behind him glowed warm against the twilight. Marina walked out moments later, her hair loose for once, her hands still smelling faintly of daisies. "She had a good day," she said softly. "She did," Daniel agreed. "Because of you," Marina shook her head. "Because of love." They stood in silence, listening to the faint hum of cicadas and the whisper of wind through the trees. "You ever think," Daniel said after a while, "that maybe people like us only learn the hard way?" Marina smiled gently. "That's the only way worth learning." He looked at her then, really looked. Not as the woman who worked in his home, not as a symbol of guilt or redemption, but as someone whose presence had quietly changed his life. "Thank you," he said simply. "For what?" "For reminding me what family feels like," she smiled. "It was already here, Daniel. You just had to see it." Later that night, as Marina checked on Carmen one last time, the old woman stirred and whispered, "Arthur?" Marina smiled softly. "No, ma'am. It's Marina." Carmen squeezed her hand weakly. "You're my favorite." Marina blinked back tears. "And you're mine." When she stepped out into the hall, Daniel was waiting, leaning quietly against the doorframe. "She called me her daughter again," Marina said with a small laugh. Daniel smiled. "Maybe she knows something we don't." And together they walked down the corridor, two souls who had rebuilt a home not from wealth, but from kindness. Outside, the night was clear. The storm was long gone, and inside the mansion, peace, quiet, steady, and finally real, had returned home.